Hello and welcome to the ManageIQ Sprint 84 review. This was a regular 2-week sprint and we will provide an update on what happened. Next slide. I will give an overview on the sprint. Carol will update us on the community. Dan will update us on the UI. Bronagh and Adam will update us on providers. Ina will update us on Automate. Gregg T on the platform, Alberto on the REST API, and Chris on documentation. Next slide. Okay, so in the sprint, this chart shows how the pull requests merged were spread across the various repos. John has alphabetized the list on the right there to kind of match the pie chart. Easier to kind of track, thank you. So 26% was in the classic UI, 20% were in the integration test repo, and 18.7% in the ManageIQ repo. The next one is the B2B UI plugin. We're going on in the B2B area. Then documentation was fifth with 7.3%, and then the various providers and the service UI after that. Next slide, please. All right, this chart we've changed it up a little bit. On the top line, you see the pull requests opened per sprint, and the bar shows the pull requests merged per sprint. And it's also based on 0. I think before it was based on a higher number, 200 or 300 or something. So it didn't really reflect the fluctuations as well. So I think this gives us a better overview of what's happening there. So this sprint, we had 352 pull requests merged, 428 opened. This matches roughly the output of 2 sprints ago and 4 sprints ago. So starting to see kind of a trend in that, so that's cool. Next slide, please. This is the type of pull requests that was merged in all the various repos. So 43% or almost 44% were bugs, 28% were enhancements, and 10% were tests, and then minor amounts in refactoring and documentation and tech debt. Next slide, please. Finally, this is the health report of all the various repos, leveraging the various tools that we use, measure code smells and duplication and other issues, as well as code coverage. So the one with the big change here really is the classic UI. Looks like we increased by 57 issues, so that's not a good sign. Not sure what happened there, but it would be good to review. I think all the other ones are roughly staying the same. Maybe the ManageIQ content increased by 10%. The code smells, that looks like a big movement as well. So those are the two that I would investigate. Next slide, please. And over to Carol for the community update.
All right, thank you, Oleg. So for the community side, as you can see, the month of May will be quite busy for us in terms of events. And I think I did already mention these events in the last sprint, so you can just see the details there. I won't just read it through, but mainly I want to thank David for doing most of the heavy lifting in the preparation of the demo setup. It's working well, and I've tried it myself a couple of times. Everything is going smooth, so thanks for that. As well as some of you have also contributed in ways, one way or another, like Nixie with some suggestions on the OpenShift installation. So thanks to everyone who helped to make this happen, so we can showcase the excellent work by the whole team at these events. So from now, I will be doing a bit of the lifting, in physical lifting, to bring these devices to the events. And I just think it might be interesting at the security checks at airports. Just coming back to Finland yesterday, I got randomly selected for extra screening, and I foresee more of these random selection checks by airport security. So wish me luck, and thank you. Next slide, please.
Right, so for the UI, you can see we had a total of 99 PRs, and they're broken out there. Had a few enhancements go in. When you press the retire now, you get directed to the list of requests, so then you can monitor, that retirement. Physical servers now have a console button, so that's cool. You can delete routers, network routers from the list in the detail screen, and some V2Vs, of course, moving along. I have a couple slides here showing how you can see the migration states by category. So next slide. So when you're looking at your migration plans, you can see the top there shows kind of the breakout, but then there's a drop down there in the migrations area. So this one's showing the ones that are, I can't even see it. It has started. Migration plans that haven't started. Next slide, please, and you'll see that the ones that are in progress, you can see the actual progress on them. And then the next slide shows the ones that are completed. You can see when they completed and if they were successful or not. So that's the enhancements. Next slide. And of course, we fixed a bunch of bugs, but some of them are listed here. There's a few screens that got fixed. The first three there, the secondary filter and the reporting wasn't working. When you cleared a search in the control and data store explorers, that was having issues. It wasn't getting you back to the right place. And also the ownership screen had some bugs. On the when you create a new volume from snapshot, now it matches the encryption. So if the snapshot is encrypted, it'll set the new volume to be encrypted. On provider credentials, if you change fields now that aren't related to the actual credentials, they're not required fields, then you don't have to revalidate the credentials. As far as the dialog runner, there's a bunch of different service types. So they all start off differently, and some of them were either missing the form buttons or had double form buttons on them. So that's all cleaned up now. And there was issues showing the generic objects and services, which were also cleaned up. That's it for the UI. Next slide.
Okay, so for providers, I will share an update on public cloud providers, and Adam will share an update on the on-premise providers. Next slide, please. So most merge pull requests this sprint came from the VMware provider, followed jointly by the OpenStack and Lenovo providers, followed by the Amazon provider. Next slide, please. So on the Azure provider, this sprint we updated the Azure Armrest gem to version 0.9.10. So I'd like to point out a couple of the more notable changes. So in an earlier release of the gem, we made an enhancement to allow the keys passed into the various create methods to be either camel case or lowercase. And this made the create method consistent with other methods in the gem. So it was really just for convenience and consistency. However, this change caused the creation of orchestration templates to bomb out. So during this sprint, we only make this key transformation on a class-by-class basis. Second, the performance of the marketplace image collection has been significantly improved by Dan. So to collect marketplace images, we use a quadruple nested loop, starting with publishers, then offers, then SKUs, and then versions. With over 500 publishers, it was taking hundreds of requests and a lot of time to complete. So this sprint, we introduced the parallel library. So the time it takes to gather the public images has decreased from 20 minutes to 1 minute. And finally, Alex added support for collecting Azure tags and mapping those tags to ManageIQ tags. And this support is already in place for Kubernetes and Amazon. So this brings parity. That's it for public cloud. Over to Adam.
Thank you. So this sprint, the OpenStack team fixed a number of small issues around refreshing consistencies and also made metrics granularity configurable in settings. On the VMware side, we made a number of improvements to the prototype streaming refresh, getting that closer to being actually usable. And the vCloud side added support for reverting snapshots. Next slide. Lenovo did a lot of work to get physical switches in, and this sprint, all of that work landed. So there are a number of schema changes, as well as a core ManageIQ change and a provider side change. So now they'll collect physical switches from their racks, and that's actually in the switches table with a different type. They also added support for tracking physical chassis and inventory. And on the container side, they added a user ID to the container scanning job, so you can track who scheduled that job and when it actually ran. And that's it for providers. Next slide.
Thanks, Adam. We had a productive sprint with 20 PRs merged. For V2V, Lucy added the transformation mapping service template association. We changed the role from EMS operations to automate for the service create request task method QPut. Most provision request types have a role of EMS operations, which makes sense because the provisions have to interact with the provider. The exception is the automation request, which has a role of automate. When a service provision request is approved and is past quota, the create request test method is put on the queue with the EMS operations role, which isn't necessary because there isn't any interaction with the provider. This role change applies only to the service create request test method. Udo created a credential callback method where a raised exception for invalid credentials gets sent back to the caller, resolving the issue of an automate git domain import rake task getting stuck, as well as the git repo automate data store refresh, timing out on a credential change. Next slide, please. TrueU continued her retirement as request work with the creation of the retire requests and tasks and the redirect to the request page after the retire request creation. I expect retirement as a request to be feature complete in Sprint 85. TrueU changed the retire now method to lock and set the object retirement state to initializing. This is a small but significant change because it will prevent multiple retirement attempts for the same object. While the change is applicable to all retirable objects, it's especially important for service retirement because services aren't zone specific. Schedulers running in a multi-zone environment could potentially initiate retirement for the same service at the same time. While the service retirement state machine has defensive coding for blocking multiple invocations for the same service, blocking the object before the retirement event gets raised in process will eliminate the duplicate retirement issue. Lucy added the ability to retire a container orchestration stack. Next slide, please. Billy made a change to calculate the requested quota values based on service dialog overrides for CPU, memory, storage, and number of VMs. We made an automation engine URI parsing change that will reduce errors when substitution is used, as shown here. Next slide, please. Eric resolved an issue where the template custom button dialog was not displaying the submit and cancel buttons, and where the dynamic drop-down default value contained all the list values as opposed to a single value, and where the submit button was not enabled for a dialog containing a tag control. A major effort to resolve dialog issues is underway with several PRs in progress and being tested. Next slide and over to Greg.
Okay, on the platform side, we had 41 PRs merged, some enhancements, a bunch of bugs fixed. So a couple of enhancements to point out. LJ added a timeout knob for monitoring server roles. That's actually follow-up from a bug that we saw where when then there was like a high latency to the database, the master server actually didn't complete the role assignment in time for the lock to time out, and actually then the master server really couldn't do its job, and none of the roles were actually able to run. So Joe added this timeout, so in the case where you're in that situation, it can be upped. Typically, you wouldn't have to change that, but it's good to expose it. And Yuri followed up on the work he did on the queue side to automatically set the started timestamp on a task when it's delivered from the queue. So for metric capture tasks, he updated the task, set the task ID in the queue so that would actually happen. And LJ upgraded Ruby to 2.3.6 on Travis. I only mentioned that mainly because that accounts for a lot of the PRs that are in that 41. Next slide, please. And some bug fixes. Joe V and Alberto put some hard work into fixing the config map generator for the codified environment. Fixed a couple issues where the HTTP, the Apache pod was not starting properly after running the config map generator. And Joe Raffanello fixed a backup issue. A backup was failing because of, I think, one of the one of the gems was not loaded, one of the libraries was not loaded properly in certain cases. And Yuri fixed a bug where, reported bug where often an archived VMs and instances were showing up on the VMs powered on report. And Joe Raffanello also fixed a bug with Apache being reloaded twice on log rotate. Some old code that was in there that actually wasn't needed, so we got to delete some code there and fix the bug. All right, and that's it for platform. Alberto.
Thanks, Greg. So on the API side, Tim fixed an issue where we were not sending the challenges properly with invalid authentication, which meant if you were to hit the API with a browser and you entered bad credentials, that was cached, and you had to clear the cache before you can try something else. So now we properly send the www authenticate and header, and you get your pop-up requesting the re-credentials again. Next slide, please. Okay, so Andre, the last sprint he added the create and delete for cloud templates for provider, and this time he added the update. So that's a standard post to the sub-collection of the provider for the cloud template. Here's a regular example, doing an edit of a name. And that's that. Next slide, please. And yep, so I've added tagging for 6 collections. That was a BZ that came in. So we provide now tagging to availability zones, cloud networks, cloud subnets, flavors, network routers, and security groups. And it's a standard signature with a tag sub-collection, so you can query them, assign and unassign, like all the tagging that we do with the others. And that's it for the rest of the next slide, please.
Hi, for documentation in this, we had a merge, 20 of WordPress and 4 bugs. So the highlights of the sprint.
Chris, we're having trouble hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
No, not too well.
Really
You're
choppy.
very choppy.
Copy. Give me a sec. Any better?
No.
Maybe we should just read through the slides.
Anything?
I think it's just a bad connection.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Sorry, I'm
Oleg, why don't you just read it?
Yeah, I'll just read it. So,
thank you.
yeah. So this sprint, we had 21 pull requests merged in documentation, 17 enhancements, 4 bugs. The highlighted pull requests are removal of non-supported OCP versions from the documentation, adding domain prefix explanation for LDAP authentication, providing details for the add disk method, removing incorrect information about adding database partitions, and updating content for PostgreSQL password. Slide, please. And with that, we bring Sprint 84 to a conclusion. We'll be back in 2 weeks, May 9th, for the next sprint.
Okay, Oleg and John.
Yes.
This is Bronagh. So it turns out that Alex has some visuals of his Azure mapping support that he would like to share. Could we give him a few minutes?
Okay. Go
Okay.
for it.
All right, Alex.
Hi, let me share my screen.
Yeah.
Second, I need to. It tries to share my 3 monitors. Second. Yeah. Have you seen it?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so let's say I have Azure provider, and when data will be collected, I see that there is my test instance. At the bottom, we see labels. They imported automatically now. No need to do anything in the settings. And I also want my company tags to be mapped for labels to be mapped to my company tags. And to do that, I am going to tag mapping in the settings. And I'm adding new entity for Azure VM. Let's say I want Red Hat Office to be mapped to the cost center. I did that, and after sometime when provider will be update, we see that we have this tag. Cost center is Bronagh. That's it.
Great, Alex.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else before we bring the sprint to a close? All right. Thank you, everyone, and we will be back in 2 weeks. Thank you very much.